EDUC1023 Assignment 1. The title of the Assignment 1 is called Self-Reflection Exercise Multiliteracies, and that gives you a cue into what you should be focused on specifically. So let's have a quick look at what is required in Assignment 1. There are two parts. The total assignment value for this is 30%, and the word count is 850 words, and there's always plus or minus 10% with any word count. So what this assignment is asking you to do is reflect upon and analyse your personal language development over your lifetime, and that's actually in light of the readings that you have done. So the first part is actually drawing up a language timeline and annotating it, looking at some of your readings and plopping in the correct or the accurate, well, I suppose the most relevant, perhaps not correct and accurate is not the right thing, the most relevant reference that goes along with that stage of development. And the part 2 is explaining the timeline. So there's no word count associated with the first part, with the timeline. You can put as many words as you need to. The only word count we're thinking about counting is the second part. So let's have a little closer look at the language timeline. So basically you're going to go back and look through your life, probably from birth, and you will need to ask your parents and carers at what kinds of language you use at different times, and think about what you did at certain ages and how your language use changed in some way. So the way that you might think about language change could be due to things like, was there a change in technology use, popular culture? Did you migrate to another country? Did you change your social context? Have new family, friends, started a job, gaming, online hobbies, things that you did with the community, etc. All the experiences that you had in your life. What about as you matured? So your developmental stages of language, your emergent and more proficient literacy or vocabulary use. And as you became more involved in reading and writing, and there are lots of things that you could talk about in terms of why your language use changed, and you can decide. That list is not exhaustive. So annotate your timeline. So, plot the times and the ages that you were, even the years, and actually write a little description of what kind of language you used and why you changed language at a certain point. And then, as I said, see if you can embed a few references to identify what the research, what your readings say about this particular stage of development or a shift in development. So people have asked us, what kinds of timelines should we do? What should it look like? Now, basically, you need to come up with a design that allows you to put enough text in there to give it an explanation. And I just found these just by searching on the internet. So, the one on the left has got, so for example, audio storytelling, early emergent writing, fluent, etc. So that's like the stages of development. You probably might need to change some of those headings based on your readings. And the one on the right is like a bit of a river, actually. So you might want to search up reading and writing rivers. We want a fair amount of detail. We don't want just the dot points. So you can see there's a fair bit of text there. You may need to do a little bit more text to explain it. I've got one more on the other slide. So ignore the heading. This is not what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about reading. We're talking about language development overall, but it's the design. And I know that there is a PowerPoint slide somewhere, or you can hand draw this. That's no problem. It doesn't have to be digital. You could do your own drawings around this, and then maybe if you wanted to, you can use your computer to add the text in. It must be legible. If we can't read it, and it's not clear, then you won't get marks for it. So you must make sure whatever you use, you can use whatever tool you like, whatever you use, it's got to be legible. So you've done your timeline, you've given us a bit of a potted history of how your language has developed over time and what precipitated those changes with a bit of a reference, a few indications of references in the timeline itself. So what you're going to do now is you're going to refer back to that timeline, and you're going to explain what we're seeing up there. So you've got to do your readings. Each week you have readings in the reading list. So draw on the knowledge and concepts that's been introduced in the units, and this we're asking you to draw on topics 1 to 5, and then read a little bit more around them. So you want to get really familiar with multiliteracies, and this will help you understand why some changes have occurred for you. So you might want to focus on 1 or 2 aspects from the list in part 1. You don't have to annotate everything that happened, but make sure that in there you define and explain the term multiliteracies and show how it's connected to the linguistic changes in your life. You need to discuss the issues in some depth. You've only got 850 words, so make sure you support your discussion with references. You can use first person, which is I and my, but you must actually reference things in here because this is academic writing. It's not just a personal reflection. So let's have a quick look at the marking criteria. Out of 30, as I've said, so let's have a look at the breakdown. So part 1 is your timeline and the annotations on the timeline, and we've allocated you 7 marks for that. Part 2, we need to, in there, ask you to define and explain multiliteracies, and that must be connected. You can't just have a dictionary definition. That is not appropriate. You must get the definition from your readings, but it must be woven in. It's not good practice just to say, oh, this is the definition of multiliteracies, and then move on and never actually incorporate the understanding of multiliteracies in your written component. So we want to see that you understand multiliteracies by your explanation, and your explanation should show what has caused the changes in your personal language development and how these may influence your writer identity and perhaps your literate identity, really. I mean, a writer is a bit narrow here, but that's okay. Draw meaningfully on your timeline. So we've got to see there's a connection between what you're writing at the bottom and what you've indicated at the top. Excuse me. The writing quality, we also need to make sure that your writing is coherent, you're using full sentences, they're grammatically sensibly structured, and that is 4 marks, and then your referencing is also 2 marks. The rubric is here, and I've just, on the previous slide, picked the criteria for your rubrics, and I've put this so the rubrics are elaborated. It's the same thing that I've just shown you on the other slides, the timeline and annotations, your definition, explanation of multiliteracies, your explanation about how the personal changes occurred, and on the next couple of bits, which we've just chopped off here, I think is the writing and the referencing. So think about how to present your work. We only want you to submit 1 document. Both part 1 and part 2 must be in the same document uploaded. So if you've done part 1 as a hand-drawn thing, we need you to take a really good scan of that and embed it at the top of your Word doc. Your timeline should have a minimum font size of 10, so it's readable. And as I've said, you can embed it with if you scan the hand-drawn or handwritten one. Give your work a title, and the title is suggested here for you. It's always a good idea to make sure you number your pages, put your name and student ID in the header or footer, and add a reference list at the end in APA 7th edition, which is in alphabetical order.